two teams Ohio State must beat in 2024.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Buckeye fans, to a Thursday edition of Locked On Buckeyes here on Thursday, June 20th in the year 2024. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast, and I'd like to thank you for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen every day. Here joining us for today's show, it's my guy, our guy, Jeff Hunt of the Off the Ball Network. He's also done a lot of good quarterback stuff with Stuart Brooking of the Morning Brew Stew, breaking down the top 36 NFL quarterbacks heading into the 2024 season. And Jeff, there's a conversation that we've been trying to have for literally a long time, possibly 2 months, about two teams that you and I both believe Ohio State must beat in 2024. The first one is Michigan. The second one is Penn State. And I believe wholeheartedly the Buckeyes must beat both of these teams in the fall.
Oh, yeah, they have to. We've talked about it. This is the season of no excuses, for the last, we'll say, at least 3 seasons. It's always been like, yeah, but we were so close, but this, we were so close, but this, we were so close, but this. Well, they took care of all the buts. Like, the veterans stayed. The guy, a lot of guys that we thought could go early stayed. They brought in, help from the portal, so a couple of the, better portal players in the country. NIL kicked in, they kept guys. Recruiting was still good. This isn't a top-heavy team. No. This is a deep team.
Yeah.
Recruits from all over the country. A lot of the recruits that we thought might flip didn't. The schedule, is not too bad. Favors them. Their arch rival that has kept them from the mountaintop, for the last few years, their head coach left. Not that they're not going to have a good team, but they don't have the same dynamic veteran team, that they had coming in the last couple seasons. This is a no excuses season, and in an era of college football when things can change instantly. This isn't like, oh, if it doesn't happen this year, it'll happen next year. No. It's not that anymore. With the transfer portal, NIL, all the rule changes, everything. Like your entire team could be gone.
Yeah.
In the snap of a finger. So like this is like Penn State, they've had their number for honestly since Penn State's came into the Big Ten. Ohio State's been, the better team, which a lot of people didn't see that coming. Great. It's a decent rivalry, but it's one-sided. Like it's a weird one-sided rivalry for Ohio State. But Penn State's a quality team. Franklin's a good coach. They've got a good team coming back. We've done show after show talking about like you can't lose to Michigan again. So like it's one of those seasons. Like honestly, the playoffs are expanded. I understand I don't think they can make the playoffs and lose to both these teams. I really don't see that any way possible. I know it's not impossible, but like that's not the path. So not only that, you may not make the playoffs because you need both these teams are in your conference, and you got Oregon in there too. So you got Oregon, Penn State and Michigan in the same season. Like that's 3 national title contenders, the defending national, title winner coming in. So it's like this is put up or shut up, whatever you want to say. It's a big season for Ohio State football.
It's a very big season, Jeff. And I think about those two teams specifically. One of them goes without saying, like, you must beat Michigan. If there's somebody that's listening or watching this right now saying, oh, no, they could go ahead and lose to Michigan in any given year. Well, this is not a show you're probably going to enjoy because Jeff and I are both people that are going to be like, no, you need to beat them every year. It's an absolute must. And, Jeff, I don't know if you've been on a show with me after those losses the past 3 years. I know Mo talked about it. It's tough doing those shows, man. I don't want to be on here as a fan.
I did year one. That was a rough one.
Nobody wants to be doing an Ohio State show after you lose to Michigan and go live on YouTube instantly as the game ends. Man, all those emotions, the stuff going on in your brain, the thoughts, and trying to put it all into a microphone. Nobody wants that. But we aren't the ones playing, Jeff. Caleb Downs is playing now. Will Howard's playing now. Henderson's still here. Twimaloau and Sawyer. They are believed just like I do. They must win that game. Bragging rights and everything. Now, when it comes to Penn State, some people may say, well, Jay, why do they have to beat Penn State? They're not a lock to beat Oregon. to me right now, that game
Yep.
is still a toss-up. And so if you put that game as a toss-up, plus that's a long road trip to Oregon, Penn State's that team, as Jeff said so well. Basically, Ohio State has dominated this rivalry since Penn State joined the Big Ten in the early to mid 90s. Well, if you've dominated it, and Penn State knows now they can make the playoff, and it's going to, I mean, they're going to have some type of white out or stripe out, something there for that game to get the fans hyped. You don't want to go into Happy Valley and lose this year when you have this talent, especially when it's either you win that game and you have a chance to win the Big Ten, get a bye, or you possibly lose that game and you don't even get a chance to host a playoff game.
Yeah.
You know, so many different playoff scenarios. You just got to beat these two teams. I believe they have the talent to do it. I believe my hope is Ryan Day hits all the right buttons. He's done it against Penn State, hasn't done it against Michigan. I don't know what to expect from Day in these two games.
Yeah, that's the whole thing about it. And plus, too, I think a lot of people are overlooking, in our world, like Michigan's going to be really good this year.
Yes.
Like they are not going to fall. They are not going to just fall off a cliff. They're going to be really good. So at the end of the season, you guarantee, and let's not forget the way the conference is set up now, you might have to play either one of these teams twice.
Ooh.
You might have to play Oregon twice. You might have to play Penn State. If you go, let's put it this way. I'll say this. If Ohio State makes it to the Big Ten championship game, they're going to have to play Oregon, Penn State, or Michigan for the second time. So not only do you got to go through them the first time. So what you don't want to do, you lose to Penn State, but now you've lost to them. Let's say you make it to the Big Ten championship game. Guess who might be there? Penn State. Oregon again. As of this second, I don't think we're going to beat Oregon the first time. And I don't even mean that as slander. I just think that at that point in the season, what you said with the away game. So now you're in a dogfight. There's just so many real world, if you just take your emotion out of it, then you got to put your emotion into it. So now we've got this team coming in. Everybody's patting them on the back. Everybody's telling them it's national championship or bust. All this pressure, all these players are there. We're all in, we're all in. All these guys stayed, possibly sacrifice contracts in the NFL. You got Judkins coming in, could have went anywhere in the country, all of these things. So now let's say you lose to Penn State. Well, now your season feels like a complete failure, at that point. And I'm not saying you can't fix it, but now you're like, wow, this is we really got to, pick ourselves up and get through. So now you've made the rest of the season mentally. And so far we haven't watched Ohio State, the Ryan Day era, really get over the mental hurdles a lot. You know what I mean? It's not like they've crumbled, but they haven't been pushed through it. They could have a couple years ago when we said that they could have got through Georgia. We've talked about that. We've beaten that horse. They last year they completely crumbled, after the loss and, against Missouri and all that. And we know there were circumstances, but still they didn't push through it. So do I think that Ohio State can, even if Ohio State's undefeated going into Penn State and they lose and they take that shot, can they rally mentally? Because here's the thing, if they're undefeated and they go into Michigan this year, I guess it's and lose, guess what? They're probably going to they're going to get a shot in the Big Ten championship game. They're going to get a shot at the playoffs. That's going to be an easier one to rally from. They lose to Penn State earlier. Now they've got bang, bang, bang. And now all the rankings are going to come into place and all this pressure is going to come in. So if anything, Penn State, when it happens, is going to be the more important game.
Jeff said a lot of things there that touched on things that popped into my mind. But one of them was Ohio State getting over mental hurdles. And that kind of ties into something that's going to happen before Ohio State plays Penn State. I'll tell you about it next. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors, passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time. or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Jeff, when I think about Ryan Day teams that have gotten over mental hurdles, I immediately went back to the 2019 team losing to Clemson the very next year, taking that personal and demolishing the Tigers in that game that day.
Yeah.
I also think about this year, how there was a mental hurdle in 2019. The next year, the team was not the same team, but they still had enough of the same players to take it very personal. This team, they're taking one game personal. I don't know I hope they're taking every game personal, because as we talk about Penn State, I think that game's at the latter part of October, maybe early part of November.
Always, yeah.
Before that, Jeff, talk about the Oregon game. The week before Oregon, I believe they play Iowa at home.
Yeah.
And people always look over Iowa and say, oh, that's one of those teams you can look over. They have a terrible offense, or the offense will be different. Their defense is always one of the better defenses in the country. So there's going to be a mental possibly hurdle they have to get over to win that game. And then keep patting you on the back. You might have to get over your own mental stuff when going to Austin Stadium. So sometimes, Jeff, there's mental hurdles that happen when you play another team the year before that beats you and then you want payback. But sometimes, Jeff, there's mental hurdles that just happen to creep up in the season because of various factors in the game. The Buckeyes are going to have a lot of mental hurdles and obstacles they have to overcome before they get to the Penn State week, during that game, but also when they get to that game against Michigan. And once again, I hope Ryan Day hits all the right buttons and doesn't have a Urban Meyer type letdown like the Buckeyes had in 2015 against Michigan State, because this team had the same hype going into this season like the 2015 team did. The difference is 2014, the Buckeyes won the national championship.
Yeah.
They didn't do that last year.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing about this is, like, again, we're talking about new players in a lot of positions. We're talking about expectations. We're talking about a college football schedule that nobody's ever seen, because this is the first year of this, all these things, and like you touched on there, like overlooking teams. Like now you're risking overlooking teams. Like, and we've seen this before. We've seen these teams, these high state teams, sleepwalk through these games and stumble through them. And you're like, oh, the day over. But you can't, because we how many times have we compared them? Georgia doesn't do that. I mean, Georgia had a couple stinkers the last couple of years, but in general, they don't overlook their opponents. Alabama very seldom overlooks an opponent, and gets caught. We like the history of Ohio State is like, they're so focused on one game that they may overlook another. And, every team has good players now in college football. This isn't, it's top heavy as far as who can win the national championship, but it's not that top heavy as far as who can win a game,
right?
Because, we people talk about Colorado. Colorado's going to be terrible next year, but guess what? They're also going to be a pretty good football team.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to play. Nobody wants to play them.
No.
They might win 5 games, but you don't want to play them. It's like situations like that. Iowa could be the same way. Iowa technically had a better season than Ohio State last year. Like, they were in it to the end. They had a chance at the Big Ten championship that Ohio State didn't. I know it's, the circumstances are different. What I'm saying is
correct.
They did the things that you need to do. So like you say, every game leading up to it. And then of course, by the time you get to, late October, Halloween, basically, you're talking injuries, you're talking question. It's always gonna be question marks at quarterback. I do not care unless one of these quarterbacks has a CJ Stroud, type season. Like, there's going to be questions at quarterback. That's just what it is at these programs. You saw Alabama last year go to the playoffs. Questions of quarterbacks all season long. They benched their quarterback at one point.
Yeah, they did.
And fought through it. So like, they're going to be so now you've got all this going into it. And, we know they're going to be in good shape. We know they're going to be ranked high. So now you have all these other things. And again, we talk about Ryan Day. We haven't really watched him figure these things out on the fly and get over that hump. Even though last year, like, we kind of blame it all on one thing, let's be honest. The year before that, honestly, better team,
Yeah.
and got beat at the end. Year before that, just weren't good enough, in the weather. But it's like, at some point you have to overcome one of these mental/physical hurdles and get this done. And if you don't, like, you can start losing fan base, you can start losing support. And once you start losing that, you start losing money. What's money mean now? That's NIL money. Like that. Now it translates straight to NIL, and these kids can go anywhere in the country and play. Like, kid from High State can, like, all right, I'm off. I'm going to Florida State tomorrow. Like, it's over. Like, that's how quick it can change, especially if you have uncertainty of coaching. So, like, they're in good shape. High State's in as good a shape as anybody in the country right now, and that can completely fall apart in 6 months.
Jeff, we're talking about those teams that Ohio State might accidentally overlook. Iowa's one of those teams. You can't overlook Iowa. You cannot overlook Penn State. You can't overlook Michigan. You can't overlook Oregon. Nebraska coming to Ohio State this year, and I am a believer that Matt Rule is going to have a better football team than a lot of people expect him to have this year. I don't think they're going to be a double-digit win team. I'm not going that far. But that's one of those teams where you look at Nebraska, really over the past decade and a half, they're not one of the top teams consistently in the Big Ten or even in their conference before they joined the Big Ten. They're not one of those teams that's really respected like they were back in the 90s and the 80s and the 70s. They're not that team. They're rebuilding. They have the belief is true freshman quarterback Dylan Raiola will be the starting quarterback for them. That's a whole other animal that really Ohio State's defense should take advantage of. But if you go into that game treating it like, well, we could just play our old game and not really strategize and not just and not do the things necessary to adjust on the fly, Nebraska could surprise you. Even if Ohio State wins, you can walk away from that game saying, oh boy, we got a lot to work on. And that's not an early in the season type of game. That's a game that I believe comes after Oregon. So you're getting closer to that Michigan game. You don't want to have issues or be working on very important aspects of the game in late October, early November. So there's mental hurdles. No, the Urban Meyer type letdown. I don't like saying that, but that's kind of the way to describe it to a lot of people out there. But y'all don't sleep on Nebraska. Them coming to Ohio State is going to be one of those games that whatever network is going to get it, it's going to be a big number. Ratings will be high, and Nebraska's going to fight to the very end.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be built up like, Ohio State's always going to get, draw the crowd, draw the interest, whether you love them or hate them. That's their advantage. Just like Notre Dame, Alabama, Dallas Cowboys, all the major brands are like, we'll tune in to hope they lose. And so, which is great. I mean, that's what we ask for. And we're typically on the hope they lose upside. Very, very, very seldom in my entire lifetime has Ohio State been an underdog. And typically when they are, look out. But it's just very seldom. But they're gonna, like you say, they're gonna come off the emotion of the Oregon game. Like by the time that comes around, that's absolutely gonna be the biggest game. That will be the biggest game to that point of the current college football playoff, scenario. So like, that's going to be talked about. But again, Nebraska's going to come in, they're going to be better. So they're going to have the hype. Like it's no different than like, last couple of years, Maryland, like, oh, look out for Maryland. They always play, Ohio State tough, or, in year at Purdue, like they had to get over the Purdue hump, even though Purdue upset them, several years ago, but still every year, show the highlights, show the touchdowns, even though they waxed Purdue, you know what I mean? But they can't erase that.
No.
Ohio State plays against history. Nebraska at this point will be playing they can play for that one win.
Yeah.
And that's such a huge advantage for these teams. But again, the programs that win it all don't fall for it. You know what I mean? Like nobody, very few teams snuck up and got Alabama or snuck up and got Georgia. And Ohio State, for the record, Ryan Day actually has been pretty good at that.
Yes.
He really doesn't lose to Big Ten teams.
No.
Except for one.
Yeah.
So like he has avoided that. So we as hard as we are on, Coach Day, give him some credit. He usually doesn't slip up. Especially when it's like, oh, here comes Michigan State. He's like, oh, wait, we're going to squash he usually squashes the bug early.
Yeah.
And so I'll give him full credit for like, okay, you got a plan. You're going to squash the bugs, but you haven't beat the good teams. When Oregon came to town, you lost to them, a few years ago. You can't beat Michigan. Like, you're not beating the good teams. You almost had Georgia, but that's still an almost. So outside of, we've talked about it on your show, outside of the one Clemson victory, he hasn't overcome, the at least even team. He hasn't even overcome the even team yet. And he's going to have at least 3 of them this year. And then also try not to, to what you touched on, slip up the other ones.
Jeff, in all this conversation, there's an impact on Ryan Day if the Buckeyes win both these games, lose both these games, or split. We'll dive into that impact next. One thing about Ryan Day, and there's a graphic out there, and I've talked about it on the show, that in top 10 games in Ryan Day's career at Ohio State, Ryan Day is 8-7. I believe in the same time span, since the start of the college football playoff, Urban Meyer from 2014 to 2018 at Ohio State, he was 12-3. The one big advantage in top 10 games between Urban Meyer and Ryan Day is Urban Meyer had a lot more experience in those games, so he knew how to prepare, he knew how to respond, he knew how to motivate his players, he knew how to even say some things that coaches nowadays can't say, but they worked for those players during that time period. Ryan Day's literally learning this stuff on the fly, so it's a difference in age, difference in tenure as a head coach, all of those things. Mo Murphy, Jeff, has said this so much, and I mentioned that 8-7 against top 10 teams for Ryan Day on purpose, because Mo says, and he believes it, I believe it, Ryan Day is kind of coaching for his job this year, which is a little weird to say when you have been so good with the win percentage and you're basically beating everybody you're supposed to beat. But Ryan Day is coaching for his job. If the Buckeyes happen to win both of these games, that provides a little bit more job security for Ryan Day. If the Buckeyes split one of these games and the split is beat Penn State, it's lose to Michigan, it's here we go again. If they happen to lose both of these games, Jeff, Ryan Day, 2 losses in the regular season, that seat is going to be very hot.
Yeah. I don't think there's any surviving it with losing to both of them, even with the Oregon win, because they're going to see the same thing that we're seeing. Like, you obviously didn't get something done. You had everything you needed outside. I mean, there's not even really a world to where I can see like a set of injuries because they're so deep.
Yeah,
this is the deepest. I don't know if it's like you said. I don't know if it's the best Ohio State team we've seen in a long time, because we've had some great players come through there, but it is the deepest. Like, because we didn't, so many guys stayed an extra year. So like, it's definitely the deepest Ohio State team. So like, I don't even think injury can be, an excuse, because they're as deep as any of these other teams. It's not like, and again, we're talking about, if we're talking specifically about Penn State, Michigan, like, they're not bringing back juggernauts either. Like, at least last year, he could be like, Michigan was better. They had all their players back. They were born to do this. We had Kyle McCord. Like, it just wasn't going to happen. And they played good. Like, that's the truth of it. This year's not that. Like, if this year, if anything, again, I just said it, they're even with these teams. So if you're even, you absolutely have to win if you're Ohio State. You have to start winning the pick'em games, because you've got every advantage. You've got the, the practice facilities, all the little things that any football team would want to have, Ohio State has. So if it comes down to coach versus coach and you can't win, like, you got to move on. We can't keep doing this every year. Jay and Jeff can't, keep, coming on every, February and asking like, when will Ryan Day get fired if it goes wrong? I think this is all or nothing, definitely for Ryan Day.
Yeah, it has to be. And you would like to think, hey, his team has prepared, that he's built a team for this season. But Jeff, one of the reasons, and I'm going to go on a little tangent here, because I've heard people say this is the best Ohio State team in about a decade, or I don't know if it was Jim Tressel or Urban Meyer or someone else. I don't know. There's been a lot of quotes floating around lately. Buddy, I got a hard time saying this is the best team in a decade before they even play a game together. I can't do that. I can't sit up here, and I always talk about poor analysis and people making bold statements without actually putting in the proper context, or really just using their brain and saying, Is Caleb Williams truly a top 5 NFL quarterback before he plays an NFL game? No. Why? He hasn't played an NFL game. And so it's really weird that there are so many smart people in this sport that have coached it, that have won national championships, all of those things, that are saying things before they actually play a game.
Yeah.
Can this Ohio State team be the best Ohio State team in a decade? Absolutely. I will not say it can't be. But you can't say that before they play a game together. And you can't base it off the Akron game or the Marshall game. Base it off the Oregon game, the Penn State game, the Michigan game. Do they go undefeated in the regular season? Because a lot of national championship teams at Ohio State, they don't go undefeated in college football. A lot of teams that win the national championship, they're not undefeated, which isn't a bad thing. It just goes to show how hard it is to win 12 regular season games, win your conference championship, and then run through the playoff. It's very, very hard. So, Jeff, I would love to say this is the best Ohio State team in a decade. On paper, maybe, but paper don't mean much to me. We got to put the games on. You got to play the games. And until they play a game, I can't go as far as to say that Ryan Day has built and put together the best Ohio State team in a decade. No, let them play in the fall. Then we'll make some bold proclamations if we need to.
Yeah, it's a really talented team, but like I think a team that's going to be forgotten in history, like as far as just if I got to just come up with one example of a team already, that 2019 team is probably honestly the best Ohio State team I ever watched. It's just you had playoffs, the matchups, honestly, the penalties, who knows what would have happened versus LSU.
Yeah.
But that team was the best I ever saw because they had the quarterback, they had everything. If this team had Justin Fields, I'd be like, or CJ Stroud, I'm like, okay, no doubt.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's absolutely no doubt, but they don't. And I don't know what these kids are going to do. I don't even know the fact that we don't even really 100% know who's going to play quarterback. We've had that on your show, but like if you told me that Justin Fields was rolling out there, CJ Stroud was rolling out there, I'd say, yeah, they could be one of the best teams in a decade because of the defensive depth and how good they are. But like, let's not forget how good Jeff Okudah was. Let's not forget how good Chase Young was. Like these dudes were ballers. Is this one of them? The Ohio State teams are always talented. That's literally why Jeff and Jay are sitting here right now asking, can they do it? We know the talent's there. It's there every year. They haven't had a bad team. And honestly, they haven't had a bad team outside of a couple positions in 30 years.
Yeah.
Like they just don't, they're always talented. They're always good. This is why we nitpick, this is why we nitpick the coaches. This is why we, nitpick the quarterbacks. Yeah, we know they're good. We know they're a really good team, but y'all, I don't want to go back to, 9-3, 9-4, 10-3 Ohio State teams. Like that's not fun.
No.
The last few years have not been fun. And they've been really good teams. So what? It's not fun. You know what I mean? Like we need to be in the mix. And I know we went to the national championship game and lost. I don't know what to tell you. That was a fine year. Okay. I know that we had Georgia on the ropes. That's fine. If we came off a Michigan win and had Georgia on the ropes, I would consider that a good season. But guess what? We lost the last 2 games. Lost the last 2 games last year. Pulled a Rose Bowl out that nobody will remember. Like that's not enough. Like we know we've got good teams, big deal. Like we're aware of that.
Jeff, that Rose Bowl, the game against Georgia, the 2019 team in the national championship, you just bottled up a lot of stuff that kind of describes Ryan Day in big games. Yeah. I'm not trying to be negative here, but the 2019 Clemson team, that game, literally one of the best games, Ohio State games in a loss that I may have watched in my life.
Yeah.
Drama, physicality, plays on both sides, figuring like it was one of the better games, and I walked away from that game defeated, really hurt. And my emotions were not okay.
Yeah.
2020 losing, they weren't supposed to play. Alabama was the best team start to finish of that season, so it didn't matter if they played Ohio State or whoever they played. They were going to steamroll and go right over that team. That's what happened. That Rose Bowl, nobody talks about it at all. Yeah. And I think when we do talk about it, it's in Jigba, his record, Harrison Jr.'s coming out party, and then also that Ohio State's defense was not good. Yeah. I mean, it was not good at all. But that Georgia game, think about this, and this is going to go back into the season and then going to wrap up the show. that Georgia game, on paper, Jeff, if you were to go into that game and say Stetson Bennett would make the bigger plays down the stretch to overcome and beat a C.J. Stroud-led offense and team, you would have said you're crazy. But that's what happened.
Yeah.
And in this season, Jeff, we're about to start. If Ohio State has a quarterback that we realized early in the year, this guy can't make the big plays, I'm going to be sitting here like, wait, so we're literally a quarterback away from getting rings and winning. And again, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of stuff with Ohio State where it's like, oh, here's some good stuff. We don't talk about it because partly it's the past. You would kind of forget about it. Nobody wants to go into a game believing something is going to happen and then quickly realize, no, the guy on the other side is going to make more plays than our quarterback. Stetson Bennett, a good quarterback. He's not better than Stroud, but he made more plays than Stroud did down the stretch of that game. Ultimately, Georgia won that game. In this year, against Penn State or against Michigan, if Drew Aller makes more plays than whoever Ohio State's quarterback is, we're going to have a lot of issues because to me, he's not a good quarterback at all.
Yeah.
If whoever Michigan's quarterback is, Alex Orji or somebody else, if they make more plays than Ohio State's quarterback in that game, Jeff, there are serious problems.
Yeah.
And it's not just the guys on the field. It's also going to go back to Ryan Day because he put the team together.
Yeah. It's like I say, it's all in the plan coming in the season. We talked about this at the end. We'll say it ahead of time. We always talk about this is the time of year to where Ryan Day needs to recognize the flaws, and he hasn't done that yet. Like he hasn't recognized the flaws. Like the season will start and you're like, how did you not know who was going to play linebacker? How did you not know who was going to be your starting running back? How did you not know that McCord couldn't do like all of these things that were like, what was Ryan Day doing during practice? This is right now in these days in the middle of summer. This is when he needs to recognize the flaws. His coaching staff needs to address them. If you need to make drastic changes, make drastic changes.
Right.
Like you have to, this is when you have to fix it now. We can't roll into another season and like, ooh, well, if there's any work to do with this team by like week one, if there's any work to do or any question marks that we can see, they're in trouble.
Big trouble, Jeff. It's always fun having you on. Got to do it again down the road. Guys, you can follow Jeff on X at jhunt006. You can follow me on the same platform at jstevens07. Jeff is a part of the OG3 at the Off the Ball Network. This has been Locked on Buckeyes on a Thursday. We'll see you next time.